for joining me for Conversations to Enlighten and Heal. On Conversations, I speak with some of our world's most renowned teachers and masters in the field of healing, personal development, and spirituality. Today, we'll be exploring the Soulmate experience with authors Molly Apple and Joe Dunn. Molly and Joe share with us their unique view on soulmates and what the soulmate experience is really all about. We talk about the soulmate experience as a healing journey and what to do if you want to attract your soulmate. Molly and Joe also speak about how to keep your soulmate experience alive and how to apply the principles in their new book, The Soulmate Experience, to relationship challenges like jealousy. They also show us how creating a conscious, open, and loving relationship can be a great joy and source of play and fun. Join me now for this soulmate experience with Molly Apple and Joe Dunn.
Welcome to Conversations to Enlighten and Heal. Today I'll be speaking with Molly Apple and Joe Dunn, authors of The Soulmate Experience. Conversations is sponsored by HealthMasterySystems.com, holistic products for body, mind, and soul, and PurePlantEssentials.com, organic aromatherapy. Please visit these websites today. Molly Apple and Joe Dunn are the hosts of the popular Facebook community, The Soulmate Experience, which now has over 30,000 friends. Molly and Joe have been enjoying the honeymoon phase of their relationship for more than 8 years now. They've dedicated themselves in their relationship to exploring how to keep the magic alive in any relationship. Their new book, The Soulmate Experience, a practical guide to creating extraordinary relationships, offers both singles and couples an abundance of powerful and practical ideas, tips, tools, and techniques for enjoying close, intimate relationships that are fun as well as transformative and healing. You can find out more about Molly and Joe at their website, thesoulmateexperience.com, or friend them on Facebook at The Soulmate Experience. Please welcome to the show my very special guests, soulmates Molly Apple and Joe Dunn. Welcome to the show, Molly and Joe. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, KG. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's jump right in and get to the heart of the soulmate experience. Could you share something of your own personal story, Molly and Joe? How did you, meet each other? How did you begin your soulmate experience? How did it come about?
Well, we actually met online, which is not uncommon these days, but there are a little bit uncommon things about how we met online.
We didn't do the traditional sharing of photographs and
background details, interests.
And why was that?
That was about 8 years ago.
Yeah, but why didn't you share the usual things with each other?
You know, for me, I attempted to use one of the services, but when I came to the part about having to put in details about myself, I had this very strong feeling that whatever I put in there was kind of limiting not only who I was, that I was in a process of, discovering who I was, and this idea that I'm these things that I put in these little boxes just didn't feel right. And even more strongly was the idea of defining what it was I was looking for. I found that I knew something magical was out there, and I really felt that anything I put in a box would restrict that possibility. And I ended up not being able to fill out any of those forms on any of the dating sites.
Which was very fortunate, I think, for both of us and our relationship.
So how did you connect? If you didn't fill out any of the forms?
Yes. We actually met on Craigslist, which doesn't require forms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can put out an ad with anything you like, and Joe had put out a very, very, very simple ad that there was something about his ad that he wasn't talking about anything in particular he was looking for, and he didn't say anything about who he was. And that sounds very vague, but to me I found it very open. And it intrigued me. I'd looked at probably hundreds of ads, and I responded to 2, and they both had this feeling of, I'm open to whatever it might look like. He said something like, it might be friends, we might do things together, we might become lovers, I don't know. And I really liked it.
So were you in the same part of the country? I mean, how did you go about connecting?
Fortunately, we were. We were exactly 42 miles apart.
Did you know that when you first responded to his ad? Did you know he was in the area?
I knew he was in the county, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then...
So did you meet right away, or...?
No, it took, let's see, you're better. It took about 3 weeks or so before we met. And you know, every day, multiple times a day, we would continue this dialogue that very quickly turned towards a conversation about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't share any details about what we did for a living or what we had done in the past or where we'd lived or anything like that. We went pretty much immediately into this dialogue about what makes relationships phenomenal, which is something that, you know, I've been studying and thinking about for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, KG, that I remember being quite intrigued because I was expecting the usual questions. You know, what do you do? How old are you? What do you look like? All those things. And I think, you know, as time went on, and Molly never asked those questions. You know, I was really intrigued to know who is this person that you know, obviously that doesn't really care about those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great joy when we first met because we hadn't exchanged pictures, and I had no idea how old he was or what kind of shape he was in or what he looked like. And I walked into the little cafe, and I'm like, wow, he's cute. I lucked out.
So exactly what was the setup?
That we met?
Yes, how did how did you say you would recognize each other?
We didn't know, but
it's cute. Maybe a little corny too, but we the one thing that we did know is that we both enjoyed the game of Scrabble.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was there first, and I had a Scrabble board out on the table,
Uh-huh.
in the place.
Uh-huh.
And
with some cute little things. What did I say?
You had our names on the Scrabble rack. He had put our names, Molly and Joe, which is exactly 7 letters.
Uh-huh.
And I walked in, and he looked up, and he just slowly turned his rack around so that I could read the names on there. It was adorable, quite beguiling.
Very enchanting.
And I have to say, in terms of the soulmate part of it, when I saw his eyes and when I heard his voice, I had the strongest feeling that it's a combination of I know this person and I've known them before and I'm meant to know them, and it was really strong.
Like a recognition.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It felt right.
Very.
Yeah, there was a commonality there. You know, shared, like you'd already had this shared experience, and you were just re-meeting each other.
Right.
Yeah. So, what exactly is the soulmate experience?
Good question. Do you want to answer that?
You know, we called our page in our book The Soulmate Experience because we felt that it was something that almost everybody has had a feeling of that kind of deep connection to someone. You know, whether it's a partner or a child or a friend, that feeling of being totally deeply connected on many different levels is something that many people have experienced. And we believe that you can sort of access that experience by doing certain things, like letting go of certain things that might be in the way.
Yes.
Judgments and expectations.
Yes. Yes. Well, talk about that. How do judgments and expectations get in the way of connecting?
You know, for one, when we go back to how we met, if I had felt like in order to be my soulmate, somebody would have to have certain qualities. I mean, I would feel that those, and I did have that feeling, like those expectations about somebody would get in the way of me being able to see beyond, a connection that goes beyond any of those sort of
surface level
appearance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we probably wouldn't have this relationship today had we gone in there with those judgments and expectations.
You know, even if they weren't that strong, if we had just, you know, if I had found a way to fill in those boxes, I don't believe I would have met Joe. because he wouldn't have met what he would have seen as my requirements for a partner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. It's also, gosh, we're so conditioned to, what our
without being having any awareness about that conditioning, but it's still operating.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and
we've been trained from a very young age, right? This is what we should be looking for.
And I think that training is actually increasing when I look at, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and when I look at the kinds of shows that she and her friends watch, it almost seems like, like everything else in the media has gotten so tight. Mm-hmm. It feels like those messages are so ingrained about, all kinds of messages about how relationships should be, how partners should be. Mm-hmm. Once you are boyfriend and girlfriend, that means a whole bunch of things. So mm-hmm. I feel like all of those kinds of ideas that we're unconsciously abiding by in our lives mm-hmm. can prevent us from connecting on really deep levels with people.
Yes. So what about values? I mean, what about having similar values? You and Joe must share similar values, it sounds like.
Well, it's we talk about values quite a bit, and what we have come up with is that they're essentially a collection of beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And you can change your beliefs, and consequently you can change your values. So I don't know that we necessarily had similar values. Would you say we did?
Yeah, I think when we think about beliefs, right? Having similar belief systems, right, helps you get along better. But one of the things about values is so often people will say they have a particular value, like I value monogamy, and say we both have that value, and yet we haven't really explored what that means for each of us. It's really a pretty large collection of ideas can be mm-hmm. attached to a value like that. So if two people say they hold the value of monogamy, and for one person that means my partner will never look at another person when we're out. They'll always be aware of how I'm feeling, and if I get to feel a little jealous, they will respond to that and will stop doing what they're doing. That could all be in this container called the value of monogamy. Mm-hmm. So I do think that similar values in general, but that we have to explore what exactly those values are to us.
Yes, because values can be in conflict.
They could be.
Right.
Like you could have a value of monogamy, but at the same time you want to have authenticity, complete freedom to express your authentic selves.
Yes.
And they could definitely be in conflict with each other.
There's a huge conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, and so if we don't explore together, we don't know what's going on. We both hold this value, and I'm expecting you to hold it the same way I do.
Yes, and that's I think that can be a huge assumption, that there is similarity that gets projected rather than explored, and that's I think that's something we need to talk about here. As far as talk about the soulmate experience as a healing journey to coming to more realization of your authentic self.
Absolutely, beautiful definition. It involves really healing and growth are two of the primary qualities of when for ourselves and for other people we've talked who feel they're in this kind of relationship. They're growing together. They're helping each other grow. Mm-hmm. They're helping each other heal, and they take responsibility for their own process.
Right.
So talk a bit more about that. What does that look like in practical terms? Could you give an example of maybe a hard place, a challenge you've come up against in your relationship? I know I watched a video you did on YouTube about the challenge of jealousy in relationship. Could you talk about that, that experience, and how do you get through jealousy? Because I think jealousy is something that comes up in relationship, and a lot of times people just never deal with it. And it sounds like one of the things that you keep it clear and clean between you at all times. You never let anything go unaddressed. If it comes up, if it arises, you honor that it's come up. It must be a part of your journey together. And so you talk about. It sounds like you guys dialogue a lot about how you're feeling in any moment. You don't just push it down or away, or no, this is an uncomfortable feeling. We don't want this to get in the way of having these good feelings about each other.
I don't think it's because we don't want it to come in the way of having good feelings about each other. I think we use whatever comes up to enhance the feelings we have about each other.
But a lot of people wouldn't see it that way. You know what I'm saying? They think it's going to come up and contaminate, or somehow they're going to lose that honeymoon feeling, that soul-connected feeling with this monster has just come up of jealousy.
Right?
So you feel like, oh, I'm a bad person for being jealous, or there are all these things that go on that are unspoken. And so what do you do? Do you have a language of connection with each soul connection with each other?
I think that underneath everything we have this sort of trust that I can put anything out in the space, and Joe isn't going to judge me for it. He's going to step back and look, okay, let's look at this thing. A new thing for us to explore. Molly's jealous.
We basically take the approach that everything can contribute to our relationship, especially the tough stuff.
Especially the tough stuff. We know when something tough's going to come up. Oh, we've got a lot to learn here. Okay, let's go.
So give an example. Molly's feeling jealous. And what do? What's the dialogue? What is your process with getting through those uncomfortable feelings to enhance your relationship?
Yeah. So let's say Joe and I both swim, and let's say I'm 48. So, and I'm in pretty good shape for 48. But if there's two young ladies in the next lane who are 22, I know that if I look at them and think, oh, Joe's going to see them, and I'm not going to look so good next to these two. That's the origin of the jealousy, right? The low self-esteem voice that would give myself a message like that. An instant reaction of the jealousy comes over me. I lose strength. I can't hardly swim because I'm suddenly in this. So, if there's an opportunity for me to immediately, at the end of a set or something, say, hey, Joe, two women there said I'm giving myself these negative messages about it, and first of all, coming clean like that, all of a sudden I'm outside of my process.
Yes, and you're not identified with it.
Yes,
right.
Yes, and he's so accepting of, okay, so this is where you are, and he might give me a message like, you look great too, sweetie, or something like that. But I think more than that, we talk about first of all, going back through how myself giving me those messages are what causes the jealousy in my body. So, okay, so he might talk to me, what could you be thinking about instead of that? What could you focus on in this set instead of this?
Right. Like how about I'm 48 years old and I look totally great for my age.
And to remind me that if I want to give myself any message at all, that one would produce a much better feeling than
of empowerment and honoring your own self.
Yes,
right.
And then another thing would be, for us to look at them and say, yeah, they look great, they're beautiful, and not go to the comparison. Like practice looking at them, saying that with Joe. Practice not moving into a comparison space.
Right, so that Molly can get to the place where she can look at them and say, wow, they're really attractive.
And that's
which
is happens with some.
Well, this goes back to what you were talking about, non-judgment, because Molly, is judging herself with this comparing mind. Isn't that what you're talking about? This comparison, that's the mind. The mind is always comparing.
Right.
And it wants you to identify with it, and it does all these different things.
Exactly.
And so it sounds like
that process explicit with each other by talking about it. Here's what my mind's doing. We do that ourselves too, right? Watching our thoughts. It's part of the very first thing we talk about in our book is getting more skilled at watching what you're thinking, because it's so important. It pretty much creates your emotional experience. So but it's lovely to do it with a partner out loud. Here's the thoughts I was giving to myself. Okay, let's talk about letting go of those and what could you do instead.
Replacing with another thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to just have that support of somebody to totally be fine with me having that experience and helpful with,
Well, it sounds like, you've done these processes with each other. You've kind of dived into your uncomfortable feelings enough so that you do trust the journey of going down in, and that you'll come out the other side, and how it has enhanced, and maybe that's the trust that you've developed over time.
Yeah.
To experience your feelings and all these thoughts and all as a healing journey. And so you're really committed to, taking that, everything that arises, taking it as an opportunity, seeing it as an opportunity to enhance your relationship. Is that right?
Absolutely, especially when you do it a few times and you see the results.
Yes.
Of working with this tough stuff, and when you come through on the other side, you are so much more in love than you were when you started.
Yes, because you face more barriers to love.
I'm sorry?
You've faced more of your barriers to love.
Right.
And dissolve them.
Yeah.
Dissolve them.
Yeah. So what would you tell someone who is looking to attract their soulmate?
I think the first thing we would say is be ready. Right? Maybe focus less on the being out there looking for your soulmate, and more on being ready for one.
Being a soulmate.
Yeah.
Right. Which, for us involves doing that internal sort of searching for the things that might be blocks, whether they're things we already talked about, limiting ideas about who my partner is, limiting ideas about what my relationship could look like, but also, past resentments from relationships
that we're dragging into this relationship.
Yeah, can be in the way. Can not only make a relationship difficult once we're in it, but can also prevent us from being open to the kind of relationship we really want. All of this stuff, we could call it baggage. And, bringing our awareness into all of our own blocks, so regrets we carry around, expectations we might have for a future partner, and beliefs about, again, a life, ourselves.
What it should look like.
There's such an incredible amount of, I kind of hesitate to use the word work. I like to use the word exploration that we can do when we're single, that we have the opportunity to do, to really sort of open ourselves up for a bigger relationship, a bigger, what we'd call a soulmate experience.
Well, certainly you're giving tools for people and just connecting with having a soulmate type relationship with their own selves and with the close friends, family they have right now, that it's a soulful that you're connecting authentically with people.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? That kind of prepares the soil, prepares your mind, prepares your heart for being able to receive a soulmate.
That definitely is what we're saying, and that was our goal from the beginning, is to put it out there in a very practical, user-friendly way, so that people could jump right in and start preparing for their soulmate.
And people are having, following those first 4 chapters in our book are about sort of opening yourself up to a greater experience. And people are reporting that it's absolutely working for them, even if they haven't met somebody yet, that they just feel like the connections that they have in their lives with their friends, with themselves, are feeling deeper and more soulful as they, expand their awareness to letting go of some of these things that they've been dragging around that are connecting preventers.
A lot of your book is devoted to how to keep the soulmate experience alive. Could you talk about that?
Sure. It's such a big part of our book because, from what we've seen, that's the part that's usually left out. Everybody will tell you how to find a soulmate, but gosh, what do you do once you've found them?
Yes.
Yeah, how do you keep it alive? You know, we hear a lot, particularly on our page, people come to our page and said, you know, I thought I found my soulmate. We were together for 6 years. I really thought my soulmate, and then it turned out not to be. And I always have a little question, like, could they have found more soulmate experience in that relationship if they'd had some of these tools, and if they both had an interest in keeping it fresh and alive?
It sounds almost like they just didn't deal with the things that were probably coming up all along. They just did, like I was saying earlier, how people don't want to deal with those tough spaces, that uncomfortable feelings and stuff that get triggered, and you just kind of, and then it builds and builds and builds, and then it's like, it just becomes the elephant in the room. It's like it's like it's gotten all this energy around it because you've put it in, it's like a shadow. These shadow elements, that just eventually have to come up. You can't, it's like a beach ball. You can't just keep it, pushing it down. It's going to come up,
Yeah.
So we all have wounds and things from our early childhood, even in the best of circumstances, that, need to come up and be healed.
And one of the great things about knowing how to work with wounds in terms of a healing, establishing a healing environment where we work with healing as a joyful thing to do. When I detect in Joe, or he sees in me something that could use healing, I mean, it's such great fun once you get the hang of it.
So talk a little bit more about how you create this sacred space, this healing environment that nourishes the soulmate experience.
So I think the first part of it is that kind of trust we have, and it's not the kind of trust that I trust Joe to do something or not do something. I'm not talking about that kind of trust. I'm talking about the trust that you were speaking of earlier, KG, when you said, after you've done this a little bit, you begin to trust the process. That if I am vulnerable, if I am willing to open up and share this scary thing, that I've seen Joe be here before for me. He'll do his best to be here and to help me look at it and work with it. And you learn that being vulnerable is kind of the key. Not stuffing it down. And it's been in there forever. This is the time I can finally take it out, and somebody's willing to look at it and not take it personally.
Well, aren't you really saying that, hey, I really want to deepen in my love for you, with you, that we share, and this is coming up. This is like a block, a barrier for me to deepen. This is something I need to face within my own self, that's like a shadow haunting me.
Right. And I think that if we know that, our partner will give us that safe space to express that, it makes it much easier for us to pull it up and lay it right there on the table.
Well, and also it sounds like to me, like with this earlier thing you were talking about how to prepare yourself for attracting and being in a soulmate relationship. A part of that inner work, it sounded like both of you had done some inner work with your own trusting yourself with being able to face things within your own self, deal with the baggage, deal with the shadows, deal with the resentments, deal with is that right? So that, you were trusting yourself so that you could trust another person.
I think it's true. I had a group that I hosted, a spiritual group, for a number of years, and every week. And one of the things we did in there that I loved was the space was so safe that people came and brought their most difficult things and brought them out and said, I've never told anybody about this, and I'm going to tell this whole group, and we're going to look at this and see how I might heal this. And it was so in that, for me, being able to do that with my own stuff and bring it out and realize, wow, when you're not just working on it yourself and you have these other people who all have your best interests at heart, there's something just marvelous about bringing out something scary. It began to be, you wanted to do it.
And by the time I met Molly, she was already an expert at doing that. So it made it very easy for me. I mean, the space was already clean and safe, for me to dump my baggage at her feet.
Isn't that the way of the divine feminine?
Yeah, he did. He brought a whole bunch for our very first date. He brought a whole bunch of suitcases full of baggage.
and little by little, we opened them up, and Molly showed me that they were really empty.
Yeah. It was your imagination, it's not the shadows themselves, but your imaginations about what those shadows were and what they meant, and, that was what was...
A cute example, too. When we met, Joe is a very accomplished swimmer, and I was terrified of swimming. And since this 8 years, I've become a swimmer, and yet I still have a tiny bit of the fear. And I'm glad I still have the fear, because one of the joys is, when we work together in a pool and he finds new ways to help me work on this fear I have of being underwater.
She becomes so grateful, that I'm there to help her with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to, I could have gotten over it really quick and we could just do sets together, but I like that I'm not quite over it, because it's like...
I think she hangs on to it so that she can continue to heal from this. Right?
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, that's true. People do hang on to some things, because it serves them in some way, So tell us, what is your relationship like day to day, Molly and Joe? Kind of give us a day in the life of Molly and Joe.
Wow. Gosh, it's really, I mean, it's going to sound a little trite, but it's really bliss. I mean, knowing that you always have this partner who is receptive to whatever you might be coming up with. I mean, it makes the relationship a real joy to be in.
Yeah.
And that's a day-to-day thing that we have.
Right.
We've just sort of developed that over the last 8 years.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what comes up if one or the other of us has a challenge that day that might bring up some emotion from the past, or it's like we're ready to be with it, and there's joy in it.
There's almost a feeling of it's not almost a feeling, you want to bring it forward, right? You notice something in yourself, some place you're stuck, and it's like, wow, I know what I can do with this. I can bring this to Molly, and we'll work through this, and I'll be so grateful to her, and that's not that we have those challenges every day, but when we do, it's really something to look forward to.
So do you, you're like business partners. You've written this book together, and I understand you have other book projects that you're developing. So, are you at home with each other all day? Does one of you go off to work? What's the form?
I'm also a partner in a business, and actually in a couple businesses, and I work out of the house. Molly works out of the house, so we're around each other all the time. And sometimes Molly will come down to my desk and ask me, to give input on something, and I'll come running up to her and ask her for input. I mean, it's not always about relationships. I've oftentimes tapped her brilliance for ideas about, one or the other of my businesses.
But yeah, we do. I love living in this and working in this space together. It's really beautiful. I mean, I just feel like I would always spend time with you if it were available.
Yeah.
It feels
Well,
great.
do you have other friendships or other people as a part of your... I know you have a thriving Facebook community, but as far as just in your personal life, is it pretty much like a one-on-one that's pretty much the central focus of your life? Is that sort of how it's evolved, or...
That and our children, I would say.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of personal friends that I see. My life is so full and so rich, and I'm living with my best friend.
Yes. And do you give each other time for your own personal involvements as far as your own learning, and then bring it back into the relationship, or...
he swims.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. We do. We do our things separately, and then we also do them together.
Yes. So you create space in the relationship. Also, is just sort of what I'm asking. Because I think that you also need some space in the relationship, whatever that might look like. If it's going out with other friends, or if it's your own studies, or your meditation, or your own whatever that you may have in your life, so the relationship can breathe.
And
would you say that's true or not?
KG, I'm going to say that in our relationship, I don't know that either one of us has that feeling like we need space from each other.
Mm-hmm.
We oftentimes take it, to maybe go out and experience life in some way, and then come back and bring it back to our partner.
Mm-hmm.
But there's rarely a feeling of like, I know I need to get away from this.
Yes.
We just don't.
Well, that's what I was wanting to know. So it does sound like you guys are just to keep it so clear and clean between you.
That it feels like there's space here all the time.
Yes.
So that if one of us said, hey, I want to go do this tonight, there would never be any resistance from the other person of like, of course, go do that. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to do, whenever you want to do it, there would be a yes.
Yes.
We really have an intention of keeping the expectations for each other to an absolute minimum.
Yes. So share some tips for how you actually create an open, loving space for your soulmate relationship to take place. Are there some ingredients for creating an open, loving space?
Well, I think probably the main one is taking responsibility for yourself.
For your own experience.
Right, that is huge.
It is. So that no matter what I'm going through, I look first to, how I'm creating that. Basically our interpretation creates our experience. So I always take responsibility for it. No matter if it were triggered by something Joe is doing, I still look to myself. It's the way that I'm interpreting it. How could I interpret it differently? I think that taking responsibility for your own experience, mm-hmm. your partner doesn't feel any
pressure,
mm-hmm.
right, or anything like.
So there's no codependence.
Right.
I think we feel, for all the time we spend together and all we do together, I think we feel extremely independent.
Yes.
Because of that, because there's no psychic weight.
Yes.
Toward the other, pointing the finger towards the other person. So I think that taking responsibility for your own experience is huge.
Yes.
Another one is...
That's one thing to say. It's a whole other thing to actually live what you're talking about. So did you have that initially in your relationship? I know you probably had an agreement about that, but was that something you experienced right away, or did it take time?
I think we started, when we met and we started through a dialogue about relationships and what could keep them clean.
Yeah.
That's where we were talking about all these ideas early on.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this intense dialogue before we ever met about
mm-hmm.
these kinds of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really something that...
And do you encourage people to have those kinds of dialogues and conversations at the very beginning of the relationship?
We do, and what we've seen on our Facebook page, there are a few couples who have met through our Facebook page,
mm-hmm.
and they met through discussions of these sorts of ideas, because these are the sorts of ideas we post about, and people start these dialogues with each other on those ideas. Like, wow, think about starting a relationship where we take 100% responsibility for ourselves, mm-hmm. where we have an intention to use every challenge that arises to actually increase our connection, where we have an intention to help each other heal from whatever comes up, and to honor your partner's process, and all of those things. And
mm-hmm.
so there have been couples who have started long relationship through dialogue. One couple actually dialogued about these things for 9 months before they met in person.
Mm-hmm.
And they report having such a similar experience to us once they actually met,
mm-hmm.
that all those kinds of ideas were in place,
mm-hmm.
and intentions were in place before mm-hmm. they actually started physically dating.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like people, you're talking this book is really for people who are ready to experience the soulmate experience. They're ready to enter this kind of relationship, this conscious, loving relationship with someone. Because if somebody's just into having a playmate, or you know what I'm saying, a friend or whatever, you wouldn't be having that kind of dialogue, or would you?
Probably not full on.
Yeah.
No, but I think you'd still probably have aspects of it, or you could, certainly.
Yeah.
Even with a playmate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think if there were an ideal, you're right. An ideal reader of this book would be somebody who's ready for that, who's ready to really go inside and gather this self-awareness, to look at how they are in relationship, and to let go of things that aren't serving them, and to be ready to be totally open to a partner however they show up. But it's also helpful for anybody in any kind of relationship to just begin that process.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right that doing that full on takes some dedication and
intention.
Yeah, and you would know, I think some people think they're ready, but when you actually start the engagement and sharing these more deep feelings and all, you would know whether you were really wanted that or not. It's one thing to fantasize that you'd want that kind of connection with someone, but you may not be willing to do the work necessary to cultivate having the soulmate experience. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. We all have probably had the experience of growing lazy in relationship, and hoping that, wow, it's really great right now. Hopefully it'll just stay that way, and I could put all my attention on this instead. Right.
Well, I think a lot of people do think that it's just supposed to last, like you were talking about initially with why you devote so much time to keeping the soulmate experience alive. I think a lot of people just think, we have it, so it'll just go on. And that's just not the truth.
I had a teacher who used to say, we get this relationship and then we try to freeze dry it.
Yes.
Right? Keeping it just like it is.
Without having to do any work.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Well, relationships are dynamic. They're living, breathing, dynamic forces, that are, evolving. I
think we could almost call that the soulmate myth. That
yes, I think that's a good name for it, is the soulmate myth.
That's a good. And everything will be perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It'll all everything will just, is like pushing a button. Okay, everything's okay now.
But there are a ton of sources and people and programs out there to help you find your soulmate.
Yes.
But we just got to ask the question, then what?
Yes. Well, yes. I think, you have to bust the myth if you're going to get into an authentic and live truthfully in a relationship, in a conscious, loving relationship with someone. So have you found that you've developed a language of conscious, loving relationship for staying connected? Do you find that you've, just sort of, evolved a language for your relationship, that there's certain words that you use for connecting or anything like that? Has that surfaced for you, or?
Do we have any particular words?
I don't think it's not really words.
It's willingness.
Willingness and knowing.
Well, pay attention, because I'm wondering if there aren't subtle cues or certain things you're doing. It might not be words so much as just even certain subtle things that you do for staying connected.
I think it's true. Well, a great one is willingness, right? Something's coming up for me, and instead of doing what I might have done 10 years ago, which is try to ignore it, like the minute that I recognize, so it's awareness of what's going on in my body. Am I feeling something? Does something feel out of place? Sorts. Paying attention to it, being willing to look at it, being willing to share it. And from the other hand,
from your partner being receptive to it, to whatever comes up.
Yeah. taking the time to look at it. And I would think that that's more our language.
Yeah. Well, I think there must be some subtle body language you have for feeling safe with one another that is just an intuitive language that you've developed over time. So, and that can be, I think, if you could mine some of that and share it with people in your books, I think that could be helpful.
It's interesting you say that now, because I just look at how we're sitting, and we're sitting very close together, and we each have a hand on the other person.
Yeah.
So
there's certain things I'm sure you have a conscious, loving language of relationship between you you've developed, and it's probably subtle. You don't even know you're doing it. But if you could bring your awareness to that, it would be I think that would be a helpful thing to share with people, so that, because a lot of this stuff that for coming into alignment with having the soulmate experience, I think is very subtle and intuitive, how we open up, to that experience. I think that would be very helpful. It would be helpful to me.
And one thing that comes up when you say that is this idea of not ever looking to our partner as the cause of our experience. So that would certainly come through in language. I would never use language like, you did this, and therefore I felt this. My language would always be, when you did this, I told myself this about it, and so it resulted in a feeling of this. It's that always taking responsibility would certainly come through the language that I use in describing my experience. Yes.
Now that's helpful. That's very helpful. Because I know you've developed your languages so just paying more attention to that and letting, putting that out there. You've done shared tons of information in your book, but I think there's some more subtleties of what you're doing that you're just you just do it. It's just natural to your way of being with each other now.
Here's one thing, KG, that we do is regularly, for whatever we're going to do, it seems, we take time to connect with each other, to really consciously and intentionally connect.
Before we do something like this interview, right? We would sit together and feel our
well, I think that is part of what I said for creating an open, loving space with one another. Yeah. There are I'm sure there are a lot of things that you do. You just, that would be so helpful for you to share that. Because I think there's subtle cues that we give each other that help us to feel safe. And that we're heard, that we're seen, that we're understood, that we're connecting with each other. Myself, I'm very intuitive, and I can't put my finger on it, but I can feel when I'm in alignment with someone, and there's this subtle flow of information that's going on between us. And, you guys, you must have more and more. As you heal more and more, because I think we're very intuitive beings. I remember when we first started talking, how I told you my body was starting to have this experience of just, being very excited about talking with you. And it was a subtle intuitive thing. It wasn't anything I had intellectually thought I would be excited about. I would start having an excited feeling in my body, about talking with you. So, I do think there's so much that's transmitted between us on these subtle levels, and opening up our intuitions. Have you found that through being with each other that you've become even more intuitive in your day-to-day life with, having synchronous events and things like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that happens. Seems to happen all the time with us. And Molly's always reading my mind, too.
Yes.
We actually do little experiments at times, too, because, I think I'm a little bit more open to my intuition than Joe is, and so we do little experiments of helping him open to it. One we did for a number of weeks. I gave him the message of "kiss my shoulder" was the message. And he was practicing with this, and he was trying so hard that it just never come through. And one day, after probably the 10th time he tried to get the message from me, "kiss my shoulder," he finally said, "I give up." And he leaned over and he kissed my shoulder in that moment. I mean, like, that is the secret. Just
yes, that's a perfect example of what I'm pointing at here with these little. To me, that is a fun little thing that comes out of your conscious loving, your soulmate connection. Because what we're talking about for many people, the process of deepening your love connection as soulmates, it sounds like a lot of work. So, I think to give the message also that exploring this soulmate connection can be fun and safe and loving experience for people.
I don't know of anything more fun.
Yeah, we don't find it work, KG, at all.
Though I can see that it sounds like that to a lot of people. That's why we kind of like it's an exploration of life, and it's the most fun I've ever had.
Well, I think, again, going back to that, if you've cleared your own baggage before you get into a relationship, because then I think if you're just so overwhelmed with your own emotional baggage that you've never cleared, I think then it would be too, I think it would be confusing, for one thing, about what's your feelings and what's the other person's feelings if you haven't really cleared your own feelings and emotions. Does that make sense?
At least done, an assessment and know what's there and what's yours. We may not be able to clear it all before we get into a relationship, but if we can be aware of it and take responsibility for it, then somebody can help us.
Yes.
And you're right. If we have a ton of baggage, the kind of partner we're going to attract is probably not going to be one who's open and receptive.
Feels like a safe space for exploring this connection. Yeah. And if you've just been hiding from clearing your own baggage, facing your own shadows, that's what you're going to want to do. And even if it is a soulmate type connection, and probably, I mean, if you're thinking about the law of attraction and like attracts like, you're just going to attract, like you were saying, attract someone that's got a lot of psychic baggage that needs clearing, rather than being the kind of soulmate you want to attract.
Yeah, it's not by chance that people who are, have, like, let's say a lot of issues with self-esteem and don't feel good about themselves might attract a partner who would exploit that. Yes.
That's a very good, I think it's good for people to start looking at things symbolically and what something can mean, why you're attracting certain experiences or certain types of relationships, why would you attract that? What is it inside of you that is attracted? Not to blame yourself or judge yourself, but what is it that's going on inside of you that you would attract that kind of experience? And how can you grow and learn from it? Use it as an opportunity for your own evolvement and becoming more self-aware about your own self. So, well, was there anything more? The hour has gone by so fast. So we've covered a lot of territory. Do you have anything more you'd like to share with us before we close, Molly and Joe?
I think, you've given us this assignment. Now we're going to go off and pay attention to what we do.
I hope that's a juicy exploration for you, so.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing, tuning in on your Facebook community and seeing what gems you might have for us over time here. So I wanted to tell everyone, for more information about Molly and Joe and their book, The Soulmate Experience, a practical guide to creating extraordinary relationships, please visit their website, thesoulmateexperience.com, and be sure to check out their Facebook community, The Soulmate Experience. Have a beautiful day, everyone. A warm mahalo. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Molly and Joe. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you, KG. It's really been fun.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye now.